Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into the weeds of Congress in context. We're zeroing in on just one day, Wednesday, October 15th, 2025.
And not just any day.
No, exactly. This was day 15 of a government shutdown. So our mission today is pretty clear. Unpack what happened, why the gridlock, and how this funding fight connects to some really big policy debates affecting, well, everyone.
It was definitely a pressure cooker situation, and October 15th, it kind of crystallized the whole mess. The key failure, technically speaking, was the Senate vote on H.R. FAF 371.
Right, the Continuing Appropriations and Extensions Act 2026, that was supposed to be the temporary funding fix.
That was the idea. But the motion to proceed, basically just to start debating the bill, failed.
Okay, the vote was 51 yeas, 44 nays. Now, that sounds like it passed. 51 is more than 44. So what's the catch? Why didn't that end the shutdown right there?
Well, that's classic Senate procedure for you. To end debate on most things, including the motion to proceed to a bill like this, you need what's called cloture.
Cloture, the 60-vote threshold.
Exactly. A 3/5 supermajority. So 51 votes, even though it's a majority, it wasn't nearly enough. They even tried reconsidering the vote, still only got 51.
So that one procedural hurdle, needing 60 votes just to start debate, kept the shutdown going.
That's the technical reason, yeah. Day 15 continued because of that failed vote.
Okay. So, procedure side, the political fallout, the blame game, it kicked into high gear immediately. Listening to the floor speeches, you'd think they were describing two totally different shutdowns. Let's start with the majority view of the Republicans. They were calling it the Schumer shutdown.
Oh, absolutely. Leader Thune, Whip Barrasso,
Really?
They were very clear. Their argument was, we offered a clean, nonpartisan funding bill, H.R. 5371. It would keep things running until November 21st. Simple.
Clean meaning no extra policy stuff attached.
Right, just funding. And it's claimed Democrats rejected this straightforward extension because they were insisting on, get this, $1.5 trillion in new partisan spending.
$1.5 trillion. For how long?
Just for a 4-week extension. To get at the end of October. That was the Republican framing Democrats holding government funding hostage for massive, unrelated spending demands.
And they really leaned into the human cost of this deadlock, didn't they?
They did. They talked about military families missing paychecks, families worried about nutrition assistance, people in flood zones unable to get flood insurance or close on homes, real-world impacts.
And the air travel safety angle, that seemed particularly sharp.
Yeah, that one really cut through. They cited actual flight delays, Burbank, Nashville, Charlotte, Atlanta. Why? Because air traffic controllers and TSA agents are on the job, but they're not getting paid.
The stress must be immense.
Exactly. And they quoted an air traffic controller saying, basically, financial anxiety isn't just bad for morale. It directly affects safety. You know, your mind wanders for a split second. In that job, that can be catastrophic.
Wow. So that connects the abstract DC fight directly to, potentially compromised safety in the skies. A powerful argument.
Very potent. Makes the shutdown feel immediate and dangerous.
Okay, so that's the majority's case. Democrats are being fiscally irresponsible, demanding too much, and putting safety at risk over partisan spending. But the Democrats, the minority, they obviously had a completely different story.
Completely. They fired back, calling it a Republican shutdown.
Why? Why not just take the clean bill and the immediate pain the Republicans were highlighting and fight about the other stuff later?
Because, from their perspective, later would be too late for what they see as the real crisis. Healthcare. Their argument, led by Schumer and Durbin, was that Republicans were refusing to negotiate on the imminent expiration of the ACA premium tax credits.
Okay, let's break that down. The ACA premium tax credits. Remind us what those are and why they're so critical here.
Sure. So these are subsidies, basically discounts, that help millions of middle-income Americans afford health insurance they buy on the ACA marketplaces. They lower the monthly premium cost, sometimes dramatically.
And they're set to expire.
Yes. And if they expire, Democrats argued, costs will skyrocket for people starting in January. So if they agreed to the clean funding bill without extending these credits, they believe they'd lose all their leverage to prevent that healthcare cost cliff.
So it's a high-stakes gamble. Tolerate the shutdown pain now to prevent what they see as bigger financial pain later.
That's the calculation. And they also hit hard on how the Trump administration was handling the shutdown itself.
Right, the federal workers angle.
Yeah, Schumer called it a vindictive and maximum pain strategy. He accused the administration of deliberately firing thousands of federal employees, including at crucial agencies like HHS and the CDC, specifically to hurt Democrats politically.
And there was that detail about HHS.
Oh, that was extraordinary. The administration actually admitted in court documents that they'd laid off nearly 800 HHS employees by mistake.
In error was the phrase.
Laid off in error
Me.
during a shutdown. Yep. Durbin jumped on that, describing it as chaotic damage, showing, a real lack of control over the shutdown's fallout. It painted a picture of incompetence on top of alleged vindictiveness.
That's quite something. But the core Democratic argument remained focused on preventing that healthcare cost explosion. You mentioned skyrocketing costs. Can you give us a sense of the scale? What kind of numbers are we talking about?
This is where it gets really stark. Democrats laid out some specific examples. Take an average couple in Plattsburgh, New York. On a bronze plan, with the tax credits, they're paying about $282 a month now.
Okay, seems manageable.
Right. But if those credits expire, their monthly premium for the same plan could jump to almost $1,700.
Wait, from $282 to $1,700 a month?
Per month. That's a 495% increase, an extra $1,400 every single month out of their pockets. Durbin called it financial ruin for a working family.
That's staggering. Is that an isolated example?
They argued it wasn't. Another example from Illinois. A 60-year-old couple earning about $82,000 a year. Their annual premiums could go up by $17,000. Again, that's around $1,400 extra per month.
So these aren't small changes. These are potentially life-altering cost increases. What was the Republican response to those specific figures? Did they dispute them?
Mostly, they seemed to sidestep the specifics of the premium hikes. Instead, the Democrats hammered a fiscal contrast.
What was the contrast?
They drew a line directly between that potential $15,000 plus annual premium hike for a working family and the $310,000 plus annual tax cut for billionaires that was part of the Republican budget proposal.
Okay. So framing it as a choice of priorities.
Exactly. The message was Republicans are prioritizing huge tax breaks for the ultra-wealthy while letting health care costs explode for regular families. It's a classic battle over fiscal priorities and who benefits.
And the timing here is crucial, right? Open enrollment is starting.
Right now, insurance companies are finalizing those 2026 rates as we speak. In fact, Idaho's open enrollment actually began on October 15th, the day we're talking about. Illinois starts October 27th. National is November 1st. So families are getting these notices, or about to, with these potential massive hikes baked in.
The deadline pressure is immense. You can see why Democrats felt they couldn't just kick the can down the road, even for a few weeks.
Precisely. The urgency, from their viewpoint, demanded action now, hence the standoff over the funding bill.
Okay, so that really clarifies the core shutdown fight. But even with the government partially closed, other things were happening or trying to happen in the Senate. Let's shift gears to some oversight work, specifically Senator Grassley and human trafficking.
Right. Even amidst the shutdown chaos, oversight continues. Grassley brought up serious concerns about the National Human Trafficking Hotline and its former operator, Polaris.
What was the issue?
Oversight found that Polaris had failed in numerous cases to report tips, including tips about child sex trafficking to law enforcement as required. A really serious breakdown.
How bad was the failure rate? Did the audit quantify it?
It did. They audited a sample of 294 cases. In that sample, they found 24 instances where staff just didn't follow the mandatory reporting rules, plus 4 cases where a clerical error meant the tip got missed entirely.
So that's 28 out of 294. That's almost 10% in the sample.
Nearly 10% failure rate on following protocol for reporting tips, some involving children. Grassley was, understandably, very concerned. He noted the administration had moved the contract to a new provider, but stressed his oversight would continue until he was sure the process was fixed.
Critical work. Okay, moving from domestic oversight to foreign policy, there was actually a moment of good news.
A rare moment, yes. The return of 20 living hostages from Hamas captivity in Gaza. This followed intense negotiations.
And there seemed to be some bipartisan credit given.
There was. Republicans like Cornyn and Cotton definitely credited President Trump's leadership, calling him a master of the art of the deal. But interestingly, Minority Leader Schumer and even former officials like Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris also acknowledge his role in securing their release. A moment of unusual agreement.
But the situation remains incredibly tense, doesn't it?
Extremely. The relief over the 20 returned hostages was immediately tempered by the reality on the ground. Hamas still holds the remains of at least 20 others, including 2 Americans.
And there was that report about Hamas executing rivals.
Yes, just yesterday. A clear violation of the ceasefire terms, seemingly an attempt by Hamas to reassert control within Gaza. It really underscores the fragility of the situation and the view, held by many on both sides, that long-term stability likely requires Hamas being removed from power entirely.
A complex mix of diplomatic success and ongoing volatility. Now, before we get into some more legislative process stuff, there was also that controversy bubbling up about the Young Republicans chat group. How did that play out on the Senate floor?
Senator Schumer brought it up directly. He condemned what Politico had reported finding in this chat group language he described as racist, sexist, outright violent, things like jokes about Hitler, gas chambers, sexual assault, really disturbing stuff.
What was Schumer calling for?
He demanded that every Republican leader, starting with President Trump, forcefully condemn it. He also specifically criticized Vice President Vance.
Why Vance?
Apparently, Vance had dismissed the reported texts as just a college group chat and said he wouldn't join the pearl clutching. Schumer called that response outrageous and hypocritical, arguing that this kind of rhetoric isn't harmless talk, it has real consequences.
A sharp political clash, even away from the funding fight. Okay, let's wrap up with a couple of examples of Congress trying to handle other business, sometimes hitting roadblocks. What about digital assets, cryptocurrency?
Senator Kennedy made a push for it. He argued there's an urgent need for legislation to create a clear market structure for crypto. His point was, 1 in 5 Americans now own some crypto, but the rules are a mess.
A mess.
Primarily a turf war between the SEC and the CFTC. They can't agree on who regulates what. So businesses and consumers are left confused about basic things.
Like what kind of things?
Like what exactly counts as a tokenized security, a digital piece of a real-world asset? And crucially, should crypto assets held by exchanges have something like deposit insurance? Big questions for market stability and consumer protection that need answers.
Answers the regulators aren't providing, so Congress needs to step in.
That was Kennedy's argument. The market needs clarity to grow responsibly.
Makes sense. And another area needing attention, cybersecurity, especially for elections.
Yeah, Senator Padilla raised this. The Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, or CISA, had lapsed. This is S29A3. He pushed for a clean reauthorization, arguing it's vital for protecting state and local election systems.
Especially worrying given he also mentioned administration cuts to election security programs.
Right. He cited cuts of like 1,300 staff and funding being terminated for CISA's specific election infrastructure center. So he's saying we need this law back in place now.
Seems like a no-brainer, especially during a shutdown when systems might be vulnerable. Did it pass?
It did not. It failed on what's called a unanimous consent request. Senator Paul objected.
Objected to cybersecurity for elections. Why?
Okay, here's where process gets tangled. Paul didn't object because he opposes cybersecurity. He objected on the grounds of protecting Washington, D.C.'s home rule rights.
How does D.C. home rule connect to cybersecurity?
It doesn't directly. He was using his power to object as leverage in a completely separate fight over Congress's power versus the D.C. government's power. It's a common parliamentary tactic, but it blocked the cybersecurity bill for now.
Wow. Okay, and that brings us neatly to another D.C.-related issue, renaming a street.
Exactly. Senator Cruz, along with Senator Durbin actually, tried to pass a bill, S-218, to rename the street outside the Cuban embassy as Oswaldo Paya Way.
Who is Oswaldo Paya?
A prominent Cuban dissident who died under suspicious circumstances. Cruz argued it was a symbolic way to pressure the Cuban regime, similar to when Reagan renamed the street by the Soviet embassy Sakharov Plaza.
A symbolic but potentially powerful statement. Did that one pass?
No. Senator Booker objected.
On what grounds this time?
Again, D.C. home rule. Booker argued that the elected D.C. council should have the right to name its own streets, and Congress shouldn't override them.
So using D.C.'s local governance rights to block a foreign policy statement.
Pretty much. Cruz immediately pointed out the irony, saying Booker had voted for similar street renaming bills before. It just highlights how procedural objections and principles can shift depending on the specific issue at hand.
So after digging through this one intense day, day 15 of the shutdown, what's the takeaway for you, the listener? It feels like more than just a budget fight.
Oh, absolutely. The gridlock we saw, that 51-44 vote that wasn't enough, it exposed some really deep cracks. We're talking potential compromises in air travel safety, failures in critical human trafficking oversight.
And that looming healthcare cliff, the potential for massive cost increases, hitting millions of families very, very soon.
Right. So this congressional process, even when it looks like political theater or just stubborn brinkmanship, It connects directly to your safety, your finances, your family stability.
Which leads to maybe a final, more provocative thought to chew on.
Yeah, when you see such a deep divide on issues with such high stakes, where one side sees a simple, clean funding bill and the other sees impending financial disaster for millions, if that bill passes as is, you have to wonder.
Is the fight still primarily about achieving a specific policy outcome? Or has the political process itself, the act of generating conflict and drawing sharp contrasts, become the main objective in Washington today?
The tough question, is the goal policy or is the goal the fight? Something to think about.
Definitely something to mull over. That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.